OBR Straight Talk, episode 16. Hopefully this isn't one of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of OBR Straight Talk, right in your headphones, live on whatever podcast station you're listening to. I'm Bob Evans, he's Scott Kennison, and after a very long delay, we apologize. Christmas, New Year's, conflicting schedules, we are finally back in the studio, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. We were planning tonight's episode, we're recording on Wednesday night, to talk about, which head coaching candidate we thought could get the job. And here we are. Scott, we have a new head coach, Freddie Kitchens, the offensive coordinator for a half a season for the Cleveland Browns, after coming over as an assistant head coach and running backs coach, is now the man in charge of Baker Mayfield's future, in charge of leading these Cleveland Browns to their first winning season in a long time. Freddie Kitchens is the man. What do you think?
This is a ballsy decision by the Cleveland Browns. It's bold on multiple levels. One, there's people who aren't going to agree with me on this because apparently Greg Williams was never a serious candidate. It was bold of the Browns to let Greg Williams go after he took a team that was 2-5-1 and finished 5-3 with it, and was pretty close to a good play call or two on second or third down. Call a screen, call a reverse, or not a reverse, a draw, something, anything to get 5 yards on second down from going 6-2 down the stretch. It's a bold move to take that head coach with a team like the Cleveland Browns that hasn't had success in a very long time and send that guy packing. Greg Williams did about everything you could ask an interim head coach to do to be the head coach. And the Browns said, we like Kitchens. We think the real force behind that 5-3 turnaround was Freddie Kitchens' offense. We think the guy that the team was responding to in the locker room was Freddie Kitchens. We think the guy that's best suited to lead Baker Mayfield and develop Baker Mayfield and turn him into a superstar, into a real franchise quarterback who can lead this team to playoff victories is Freddie Kitchens. And this is a guy who, on the surface, doesn't have the resume to be your head coach. He has the resume to be your offensive coordinator. Definitely does. He has time as a position coach. He's been in the league for 11 years. It was time for Freddie Kitchens to get a chance as a play caller. But to give a guy who's been a position coach for his entire career and an offensive coordinator for 8 games the reins to your franchise is a bold move. It is a very bold move when you've got a guy like Mike McCarthy, who's won a Super Bowl, who has a career 600 winning percentage, who's a winning coach in the playoffs, sitting out there. It's a bold move when you have a semi-proven commodity like Adam Gase, sitting out there waiting for a job. You've got a guy like Bruce Arians, who took a team to a Super Bowl, has a winning record, wanted this job, was politicking for this job. There were a lot of guys that an old school football guy probably should have went and hired over Freddie Kitchens. I like this choice. I'm on record as saying I thought it should have been Greg Williams. I'm not going to retreat from that. I'm not going to hide from that. I think Greg Williams earned that spot. I think he did everything you could ask an interim head coach to do. But I'm not in here pounding my fist on the table. I'm not in here angry and upset. I would have wanted it to be the Greg Williams and Freddie Kitchens show for next year. My guess is they didn't do that because they knew the only way to keep Freddie Kitchens here was to give him that head coaching job. Also, it doesn't sound like Greg Williams was ever a serious candidate anyway. It sounds like he knew the whole time that this was his audition for the job with another team, not for his audition as a head coach with the Cleveland Browns. And that's fine. Why am I happy with it being Freddie Kitchens? One, I said all along that if you're not going to keep Greg Williams, what I wanted was a dynamic, up-and-coming play caller, someone who thinks differently about the game, someone who's got a fresh approach to this game, a younger head coach who might not be looking at it through the lenses of even someone like me who wants 3 yards in a cloud of dust football and thinks that's great. So I'm happy with it being Freddie Kitchens because that's part of that new crew with a new way of looking at football. And B, I wanted someone who was in this locker room leading this team down this stretch run to be there next year. I wanted one of those voices to be there to coach this team. And if it wasn't going to be Greg Williams, I wanted it to be Freddie Kitchens. Now, I'm not in that locker room. I don't know if they're responding to Greg Williams handing Kevin Zeitler an egg and saying you're playing soft like this egg, or I don't know if it was Freddie Kitchens and his innovative offensive play style and his leadership that they're responding to. You hope that John Dorsey had his finger on the pulse of the locker room and that he knew that the guy they were responding to was Freddie Kitchens, and that's why he kept Kitchens. But I like the choice. I wasn't sold on Mike McCarthy, and this may sound crazy, but because the man won a Super Bowl, I think he underachieved with Aaron Rodgers. You have one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the position. The GOAT is Tom Brady, but Tom Brady's the GOAT because he was paired with Bill Belichick. The most talented player I've ever seen play the position is Aaron Rodgers. You put Aaron Rodgers on the Patriots, they might have never lost a Super Bowl. Now, that's an exaggeration and hyperbole, but you get my point. I didn't want Adam Gase. I've never been a fan of Adam Gase. And I didn't want Josh McDaniels here. So if it wasn't going to be Greg Williams, I'm thrilled with it being Freddie Kitchens. And the Browns are taking a risk here, and I like that they're willing to take a risk.
What I personally love, Scott, about this hire is it achieves one of the main things that I had gone into the offseason saying I wanted out of the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And anybody who follows me on Twitter, I basically said the other day that I didn't care who the head coach ended up being. Aside from Dan Campbell, he just didn't excite me. Nothing against Dan Campbell, he just didn't excite me as a head coaching option. I wasn't going to say, as you said, you Greg Williams was your guy. That's who you wanted, but you're not upset with Freddie Kitchens. You're more than happy with Freddie Kitchens. I didn't even have a guy. But if I were to have put a guy, the guy I ended up speaking the most about was Freddie Kitchens. And the reason being is that it achieved my number one goal, which is offensive consistency. What you see around the league so much right now, and you're going to see, you saw it with Derek Carr, right? You saw it with Blake Bortles. A lot of these young quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota now in Tennessee, you see young quarterbacks with a revolving door at offensive coordinator. What happens now for Baker Mayfield with hiring Freddie Kitchens is that for however long Freddie Kitchens is the head coach, you're guaranteed to have the offensive mind that connected with Baker Mayfield this season and took him to the next level, or allowed him to take himself to the next level, whatever you want to call it, in-house. You don't have to worry about 1 year with Matt Eberflus as the head coach and Freddie Kitchens, and they tear it up next year, and Freddie Kitchens as the OC leaves and takes the next big head coaching job. And now you're hunting for an offensive coordinator, hunting for that quarterback's coach. You're hunting for the right pairing to get the most out of Baker Mayfield. You're not worried about, Mike McCarthy coming in and not wanting Freddie Kitchens as his offensive coordinator, and then getting stuck with the less than innovative version of Mike McCarthy that you saw the past couple of years, where Aaron Rodgers was blatantly disregarding plays that were being called in. What you're getting now is the guarantee that you have consistency in your play calling for the next X amount of years with Baker Mayfield. Now, the reason I'm saying consistency and not saying anything about guaranteed success is we have a half a season sample size with Freddie Kitchens calling the plays. It was a heck of a half season of a sample size. This guy came in, he made the right adjustments, he helped a struggling offensive line, especially his tackles, look like studs down the stretch, made Chris Hubbard look like he could be a right tackle in this league, made Greg Robinson go from out of the league to now people are talking about giving him a contract extension, made the entire offense as a whole much more efficient and much easier to run for his rookie quarterback, Baker Mayfield. The way that he called the offense allowed for a guy like Brashad Perriman to suddenly get out there and make plays, something that he hadn't done his entire NFL career to this point. The offense that was called was creative. It was innovative. Other teams were copycatting his play calls a week after the Browns pulled those plays off in a game. So we're talking about a scenario here where the Browns went out and they gave the job to the guy who has shown and proven that he can do it on Sundays for half a season. Now, I know you mentioned earlier he doesn't have the resume of other people. resumes can be subjective, right? When you're looking at the resume, you're looking for traits. You're looking for things that stand out. If you're not getting the person that has 10 to 15 years of, experience in the field, what are you looking for if you're going to hire somebody, if you're going to hire down, quote unquote? Well, you're going to look for certain traits that stand out. You're going to look for the things that you want in the guy that interviewed his ass off with you. Well, people are saying, well, Kitchens only called plays for a half a season, and he's been an assistant in this league for 12 seasons or more. 11 years with Arizona, right? 1 year with Dallas, and then came here. On top of that, you look around the league, there's plenty of guys out there that did not have the lead coordinator job or did not have the lead assistant job and then got hired. Your Andy Reids of the world, people like that, became head coaches from a lower level assistant. So it has worked out. So we can't just say that he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the job experience versus Mike McCarthy, versus Adam Gase, versus Bruce Arians, who campaigned for this job and then didn't get an interview and then went to Tampa. He may not have the experience stacked up, but when you look at the options and then look at the body of work, the in-house body of work and that connection with Baker Mayfield supersedes everything. You use the number one overall quarterback or number one overall pick on a quarterback. Your guy has a connection. This dude, from everything that our awesome staff at the OBR has reported in the forums and our subscribers out there know, he blew them away in the interview. I won't give away any more information than that. Our subscribers know it. If you're not a subscriber, we have a promo running until Thursday. Hopefully you hear this before Thursday night. But we got a promo if you want to join and read some of the great information that Lane Adkins was dropping in Rumor Central all week long. But this guy, this hiring of Freddie Kitchens as the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns, I'm not going to sit here with the pom-poms and say, oh my gosh, we're going to the Super Bowl. But right now, and for the foreseeable future, as long as there is success, he is the right hire to maintain consistency for Baker Mayfield.
I agree with you that the resume isn't as important as people think, but I said that just because it makes it a bold hire to go. When you have those resumes stacked up against him, usually in the American hiring system, you don't throw those resumes out. It is one of the problems with the American hiring system. We look at a resume, and all a resume is a list of jobs that you have convinced someone to let you do. It doesn't mean you're good at them. I mean, does anyone want Romeo Crennel as a head coach? And Romeo Crennel's resume is pretty good. Always has been pretty good. It's why he got 2 head coaching jobs. Then he failed at them. Does anyone really want Josh McDaniels as a head coach? And that guy's got the resume for it. And a resume is just, as I said, it's a list of jobs you've convinced someone else to let you do. It doesn't say that you're qualified to do the job. It means you've convinced someone else that you are. That said, it was a bold hire. But I like it because it's not just consistency in the playbook, it's consistency in leadership. And I'm a firm believer that when you come to team sports, it doesn't matter what team sport it is, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, bowling, I don't care. A big part of success in team sports is how the people on that team mesh and how they're responding to the leadership in that locker room. Sometimes all you got to do is change the leader. One of the keys to the Indians in the 95 year was not so much, I mean, it was a big thing about talent, but you had veteran leadership guys in that locker room like Eddie Murray and Oral Hershiser and Dennis Martinez. You had those guys in there to keep these kids level throughout the year, and you had leadership that they were responding to. Same thing with the Browns. That didn't just, you saw 2 teams in 2 halves. Same players, with the exception of Carlos Hyde going away. Essentially, it was the exact same team in the first half of the year and the second half of the year. A little healthier in the second half of the year at points. But you changed the leadership, and you changed the voices, and you changed the chemistry, and you changed what that locker room became. One of those voices is gone, but you kept one. So you keep that dynamic there. You keep a big part of that dynamic. And that's an intangible that doesn't show up in a lot of analysis. So I like the fact that you kept Freddie Kitchens. Now, if I may, you said there's not going to be an offensive coordinator. And I agree with you. There's probably not going to be an official offensive coordinator. Freddie Kitchens is going to call his own plays.
Yeah, use the official there, because that's what I meant when we were talking before we started recording.
There'll be someone in that role. But the guy calling the plays is going, for all intents and purposes, being the offensive coordinator is going to be Freddie Kitchens. Now, I hear Jason Snyder gearing up to yell at me that this doesn't matter because we had this argument 15 times over, whether it was Mike Pettin or Hugh Jackson. Didn't matter. Do you like a rookie head coach maintaining the play calling duties from whatever side of the ball that he came from?
Do I like a rookie head coach maintaining the play calling duties? I do in this instance, because that rookie head coach has a connection with Baker Mayfield, understands the plays that Baker Mayfield likes to have called. And we saw it for a whole half of the season. So in this instance, I like it. I probably wouldn't have liked it as much if it would have been an outside offensive mind coming in to take over the play calling and become a first-time head coach. Like, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much in that instance. But in this one, I do, because he has the relationship. And going back to what you originally said, and I can't wait to get, I didn't even say this earlier, but hey, we're going to have Brent Sobleski from the OBR and from Bleacher Report on here in a few. I can't wait to get his take on this. But when I think of, your offensive staff with a guy like Freddie Kitchens, and he's going to maintain play calling, you can still have an offensive coordinator in name, right? And an offensive coordinator is still going to be responsible for a lot of different things. He doesn't have to be responsible for the play calling to coordinate the offense. He can be responsible for player personnel groupings. He can be responsible for, managing certain aspects of it. So this is why when I was saying before the show that I don't think there'll be an offensive coordinator to call plays, Kitchens is going to still do that. I think this is a position where you can go one of two directions, really. You can hire an experienced former head coach who has an offensive background, allow him to assist you in the areas where you may not feel strong yet, right? Because Freddie Kitchens has never been a head coach. He's only been in charge of an offense for a half a season. So there's many things that first-time head coaches struggle on. I was talking about it over on the OBR earlier. You have things like play clock management, game management as a whole, timeout management, challenges, things of that nature. Get yourself an experienced head coach and let him be near you, be in your ear about those things during the course of the game. And you could have somebody that can really provide value. You have somebody that you can trust to turn around and go and sit down with your quarterback while you're managing the game. Go and walk over to the position group and talk to the wide receivers coach about what's going on out there and what he's seeing and what you need to get more out of. So that's what I kind of meant by no offensive coordinator. So back to your original question, I have no problem with this is really hypocritical. I have no problem with Freddie Kitchens being the head coach and calling the plays, because I've seen him call the plays, right? If it was a new coach, I would have concern, and maybe that's hypocritical, but I've seen Freddie have success with Baker, and I don't want to take that away from him.
I generally come down on the side that it's risky, and I think a lot of times it does more harm than good to a young head coach. What they think is what got me here is my ability to call plays. And what I do well is call plays. And they want to continue to do what they do well. It's like what Hugh Jackson said. I know I can jump in and fix this, so I might jump back in and call the plays and fix it. When you're a head coach, your responsibility is to be managing the entire game. And you've got to be ready to put yourself in whatever facet of the game is breaking down. Whether that's offense, whether that's defense, whether that's special teams. If you need to go talk to the quarterback's coach and you need to go talk to the quarterback and figure out what's going on, if you need to go jump in with the running back group or the offensive line, you need to be managing the game. Clock management, timeout management, making decisions as to down and, are you going to go for it on fourth down here? There's a lot of are you going to challenge? There's a ton of game management and managing the big picture. You're no longer managing a third of the game, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams. And I think that when you're still trying to call the plays, then you're either doing one of two things. When you're supposed to be paying attention to the defensive side of the ball and the game that's going on defense or the game that's going on special teams, you're in communication as to what's going on offense, what you need to change, what your coaches are seeing in the booth, and how you need to alter your offensive game plan, and you're not paying attention to that half of the game as much as you should, or you're not paying as much attention as you should to that. Now, if you're going to do it, you've got to have a real good staff that's telling you and doing all of that work for you and just filling you into the 10,000-foot level so that you can then take that and call your plays based on what they give you while you're still dialed in. I feel it's a law of diminishing marginal utility. There's people who swear up and down that they're great multitaskers and they don't lose efficiency when they start dividing their attention. Controlled test proof every single time, no matter how good of a multitasker you are, every single task you add to what you're doing is a reduction in quality. Every time you add quantity, you reduce the quality at which you do that task. And That's why it scares me when you have a guy like Sean Payton, okay, he's been around long enough to pull off that juggling act. Freddie Kitchens is having a huge jump up in responsibility level right now to offensive coordinator. And now he's doubling that up again. I'm not saying he can't handle it. I'm not saying he's not the best person to call these plays. I'm not saying that I want to take his mind out of the offense. He's going to call the plays. I'm fine with that. But if I'm being dead honest, it concerns me to have a rookie head coach calling the plays. They all seem to want to do it, and I think it hurts them more often than it helps them.
Well, on that note, let's go ahead and bring in Brent. We'll get what he has to say about that, because he obviously has a whole lot to say. If you've been following him on Twitter, following him in the OBR forums for the last few days, he likes Kitchens. He wanted Kitchens to be the man, and he got him. So let's go ahead and we'll get him on the line right now. All right, we've got him all tuned up and live with us here on OBR Straight Talk. He really needs no introduction. Brent Sobleski of the Bleacher Report and the long-time OBR forum guy, hitting you with all the draft talk, answering all your questions in ATI. Basically our behind-the-scenes guru on the OBR. Brent, how you doing?
I'm doing well. And the way I like to describe my work, have you ever seen the movie Rounders?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's one of my favorites ever.
I am John Turturro. I am the grinder. I don't do it for the glory. I don't do it for anything. I go to pay my bills for my family each and every day and do what I love best, and to be able to do so. So that's the way I've always perceived myself in this business, and the way I try to hope to relay everything to you guys out there listening. And it's just a true joy ever since joining the website. I believe it was in 2002. And now, going on 17 years later, we're sitting here on a podcast discussing the Browns, and me having the pleasure to actually cover it professionally. It's just been a wonderful ride, gentlemen.
Oh, it's awesome. And like I was joking around on Twitter yesterday, but we need you, we need Lane, we need to get you guys on, more regularly, because the more that you guys are on, the less Scott and I have to talk. And Scott and I can already put out like an hour and a half show on our own. So like we get you on, we get Lane on. Hell, we can maybe do like a 4-way OBR roundtable. I know when Lane listens to this, he's going to hear me talk about a 4-way, and I'm going to get more shit on Twitter than I already am getting right now. But we can do this and then rotate other people of the staff in. We're really excited to get as many people on here, especially heading into the off season, because we have so much to recap from the season and talk about for the future. And we want to get as many viewpoints out there for our audience. So open invitation. I know you're a busy man, but anytime we record, you are obviously more than welcome on.
No, I appreciate it. And, it's timing sometimes, like before coming on tonight, I had to put the children to bed and get rolling. So there's a reason my initials are BS. That's what I always say, and it's apt. So let's roll with what's going on today, because the NFL does not stop. It doesn't matter if you're in the playoffs. It doesn't matter if you're out of the playoffs. There's always news. And somehow, some way, the Cleveland Browns always seem to find their way in the middle of things.
Yeah, so let's start right there then. Scott and I just talked about it for probably a good 25, 30 minutes. Freddie Kitchens. Now, OBR fans and OBR followers know this is your guy. So tell us why we should love Freddie Kitchens.
Well, first of all, it's the right choice, and that's important. Some people may not agree with that, but when you consider what the entire hiring cycle looked like from a talent pool perspective, there wasn't anyone that you thought to yourself, we have to have that coach. And that's applicable to all of the teams. That's not the Cleveland Browns. Some people would argue Mike McCarthy because of his history, because of the Super Bowl ring. But his last couple of years in Green Bay were really disappointing, not only butting heads with Aaron Rodgers, but almost falling behind the NFL curve when it came to offensive approach. And those two things had major concerns written on it for me, and hence why I never really considered him one of the top candidates. I felt that he was attached to that Green Bay core that's now existing in Cleveland, but as always more of a fail-safe than the actual top candidate. And the reason I state that Freddie Kitchens was the right choice, first of all, you never go into a hiring cycle wanting to lose an assistant coach. If you're doing it that way, it's ass backwards in the first place. If you like a guy that much and believe in what he has accomplished, he should be your top head coaching prospect in the first place, which ultimately it ended up being. And I know we can go down through a sheet of different stats that shows the improvement from Freddie Kitchens week 9 and beyond prior to with Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley. We don't need to do that. Everyone saw it. It was obvious on film. It was obvious on game days. But the biggest part to me is how the team reacted to him. And when you see the clips from NFL films with Baker Mayfield, with the rest of the team just loving being around him, that to me spoke to the type of person you want leading your team. So often we place these guys in boxes. You want to be a young, innovative offensive mind. That's what everyone wants, right? The next cliche, Sean McVay. And he didn't quite fit that realm. Now, yes, he's offensive minded. Yes, he has an explosive offense. And yes, he works with a young quarterback. But what you see is someone that has the potential to be a leader, someone that his players gravitate toward. And that is a often overlooked aspect of this entire process. And hence why when I mentioned someone like McCarthy, knowing he butted heads with his star player, I found that to be a major red flag, and then the exact opposite of Kitchens. I really enjoy seeing going through this process, how they set it up and placed who they believe was going to be the top guy in Freddie Kitchens in a position to succeed. You don't just do that in coaching. You do that as an organization as well. And I will say one thing finally on him being hired as head coach. The fact that the reports have come out now that he will report directly to John Dorsey, gentlemen, may be the biggest storyline of the entire day for anyone that follows the Cleveland Browns, because the organizational structure that so many of us have railed against for so long is finally changed.
I was saving that for the second half of the show to mess with Scott on it, because Scott's been very, very outspoken about the organizational structure and not reporting directly to the owner. So I was waiting for it for the second half of the show, but I'm glad you brought it up now, because I personally, I'm so happy. I mean, that's how it should be. Your head coach should report to your general manager reports with the rest of the executive staff up to the owner of the organization. It's just like, I mean, if my marketing assistant reported directly to my boss instead of reporting to me, I'd lose my damn mind, because I would never know what's going on. Like I get annoyed when I hear them outside my office when he and I love them both, but like when I hear him go straight to my marketing assistant and go, "Hey Zach, can you do this for me?" I'm like, "Come on guys, come to me so I know what's going on," or at least somebody just loop me and I go, "Hey, what are we doing?" Because I've got them doing other stuff, like not to go around, but just like, "Hey, I just want to know what's going on."
It's always failed leadership when you have someone skipping a level of management to report to a higher level of management. It's a failure at the top. You have people below you in a position for a reason. You issue your orders or your directives to that person and then count on them to carry those directives out. Anything else is flawed.
And it breeds contentiousness. And we saw it, not with just one regime, but with multiple, since Jimmy Haslam's been the owner of the Cleveland Browns. And hence why those of us at the OBR have just hammered this point over and over and over again, that something needed to change. And the fact that came out today was the one thing that surprised me. I wasn't surprised about Kitchens. He was, to me, the favorite throughout this entire process.
Agreed.
This narrative that he just all of a sudden showed up in the last few days and took the job was completely misplaced. But the fact that Jimmy Haslam's willing to take and redefine his approach is huge news. And I don't want to oversell it completely, because I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, he has built an entire organization around what I always call the boardroom approach. Essentially, you have so many heads of departments and you sit around a table and everyone just goes directly to Jimmy Haslam. And that included the head coach. And when you have that, and this is something that I described in the forums, you have someone that just whispers in the wind a little bit. And when someone else gets that power and fills that power vacuum, now the entire dynamic changes, whether it was Hugh Jackson or before that Sashi Brown and so on and so forth. And you can never establish a true top-down philosophy that permeates throughout the entire organization. I believe you have that now. And John Dorsey's going to be that guiding light for the entire franchise. Now, obviously, it's a collaborative effort throughout the whole entire franchise with Kitchens and Dorsey, furthermore with Dorsey and Paul DePodesta. But to me, that is far more cohesive than just saying, okay, if you've got a problem, everyone just go to Jimmy. That shouldn't be how any business works. I don't want to talk about collaboration when you've proven multiple times that when in that setup, you're going to allow certain people to gain more power or more favor based on the way you feel is successful. It's not successful in the NFL. Even if we look to a team that has similar setup like the Kansas City Chiefs, John Dorsey was forced out for these exact reasons. Yes, they're still successful because they have Andy Reid, but it was poor decisions by John Dorsey that the ownership didn't like. Andy Reid kind of won a mini power struggle. And then he gets forced out. So we can look at it and think to ourselves, this is the best possible scenario now for the Cleveland Browns. They've hired the coach that deserved it, who earned it. And then on top of it, they created a top-down chain of command that now everyone knows their place. So when you factor those two things together, I don't think plus adding Baker Mayfield, the future is so bright for Cleveland. I got to wear shades, and I know that's a cheesy reference, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment.
No, it's all good. I want to stick right there real quick, though, because you mentioned the boardroom and the whole collaborative approach, and I wanted to get your thoughts and your opinion on the Kevin Stefanski stuff. So this is a guy that we had some out there in the media trying to create some sort of internal rift because the analytics guys liked Stefanski and he came back for a second interview and so on and so forth. And now I'm sitting back here as an outsider, not in the room. I don't know anybody in the room, not that I'm aware of at least. And I'm thinking just as, a member of leadership in my job, what is so wrong with doing a second interview with a guy, continuing to get opinions and thoughts on it. And then also, if you have multiple people at the table, everybody isn't going to have the same favorite, right? But as long as it's handled professionally and everybody's like if I'm Paul DePodesta, these are the reasons that I like Kevin Stefanski as the future head coach of the Browns, so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. And then as a group effort, Dorsey makes a decision and Haslam red stamps his decision that Kitchens is the guy, and then you go on from there. As long as there's not an actual rift going on, I don't understand why people are kind of getting upset with the fact that, DePodesta and Andrew Berry may have liked Stefanski over Kitchens. I mean, we don't know for sure. We hear, whispers that are out there. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that whole thing and how much you actually think Stefanski was actually in the running with Kitchens, because if he had two interviews, that's some pretty substantial interest.
Well, first of all, there's absolutely a delineation between healthy discourse within an organization and infighting. Now, it's been so cluttered in Cleveland for so long. I think people have trouble differentiating between those two points. That's what my main concern was throughout the hiring process. With so many voices in Haslam's ear, were they going to do the right thing? And that's not a slight against anyone that was a part of the process. It's simply because you have had a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Anyhow, when you look at it, you're coming from different angles. Paul DePodesta is coming from a different angles. J.W. Johnson is coming from a different angle. John Dorsey is coming from a different angle. The owner himself is coming from a different angle. And he prefers to hear everyone's input and what they believe before he makes a final decision. And so when you get to that point, and there are people that have different preferences, that's okay. You have those internal conversations of the pros and cons of each and why you want to move forward with one as opposed to the other. This occurs. This occurred with Freddie Kitchens and Stefanski. So when you look at it, I think it came down to two factors. First and foremost, they were absolutely frightened to lose Freddie Kitchens on their staff, and it could have very well happened. If they had allowed him to interview throughout the rest of the league, he could have very well been gone. Second of all, that rapport he built with Mayfield shouldn't be overlooked. Knowing now that Mayfield was in some way, albeit small part of the entire interview process, shows how much emphasis is being placed on his development, as it rightly should be. So those two factors in the end, even though Stefanski was well liked within the organization, and it's not just the football guys versus analytics, and I'm so sick of hearing that, and I'm so sick of dealing with the post-traumatic stress syndrome that comes with dealing from the backlash of the Hugh Sashi wars, that it gets to a point where you can have that discourse and then still make the right decision. And I think that ultimately that's what came about, and we don't have to tomorrow still have a discussion whether there's a divide or rift between those two pieces of the football operations, because it doesn't exist.
Do you find that half the people who get mad and rant and rave about damn analytics and math have no place in football? We need an old-fashioned football guy who can tell you if this guy can hit someone and man up and make a play. Don't need no freaking eggheads doing equations to tell me that this person's better than this person. I watch this guy. My eyes tell me he can play football. I don't give two shits about your goddamn math. Do you find most of them have no clue what analytics actually is?
Let me put it this way.
Sobo, you just got introduced to your first ever Scott's old football head voice live on the show, and Sobo needed to take
Garrett,
a breath.
stop writing haikus. That damn haiku isn't going to help you sack the quarterback. Work on your rip move.
Oh, jeez.
That poetry ain't going to help you win.
All right, let's.
Do you think they needed to stretch before they went onto the beaches of Normandy? You know, that type of situation. No, I'm looking at it this way, and you know, I'm a little older than some of the people that are still in this business, at least coming up. 38 years old, so I came up old school. You know, I'm not old, but I'm not with the young crowd anymore. So I remember what it's like in the late 90s and how the overall approach to not just the NFL, but football in general. I mean, guys, I played in a wing T offense in high school, so give me a break here when it comes to understanding modern concepts. And I remember playing for and coaching alongside coaches that had that mentality. And there's some validity to their approach. But what I've come to learn, taking a step away from the game and now covering it, is that the best way to become better at understanding football, and this is whether you're a coach, whether you're a fan, or anything in between, is just absorbing all the information available to you. Really, that's the most simple thing you can do to be a better football fan, to be a better coach, to be a better scout, anything within football operations. To be completely adverse to anything that could be potentially new really hinders what you can become. And it stunts your growth within the game. So I understand that approach. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. I believed in it in certain ways. Still do. You know, I'm still one of those guys that I'll spout the cliche at you that the game's won in the trenches consistently, because I wholeheartedly believe that. Granted, I'm fat and I also played offensive line, but that's not the point. There's a happy medium somewhere in between those 2 points. And if you come to the realization as a fan that all 32 teams use analytics in some form or fashion and consistently do so on a week-by-week basis, it's not a scary proposition knowing that some decisions are made based on the numbers. Even guys like Doug Peterson. Hey, Doug came up in the game during that period, exactly what you're talking about, right? His career ended in the early 2000s, way before we saw this wave of change. And yet he's the same guy that in the Super Bowl last year had an analytics expert in his ear on every single play telling him what was the best percentage probability for them to win on a down-by-down basis. So being open and acceptable to both styles will ultimately lead you to the best possible outcome. And to me, I agree with you that you don't want those guys that are so hard-headed that they won't accept anything. But that's not just coaching. That's just being part of your fan base, et cetera. But I want those listening to understand that it's a part of the game now. It's going to be a part of the game, and it's not going anywhere. So when you hear these arguments about analytics versus football guys, 1, they're ignorant, 2, they're lazy, and 3, they're ill-informed.
That's a trifecta.
So
I nailed it.
So going back to Freddie for a second, Scott asked me this question right before we brought you on, and I want to get your take on it. So what he asked me was, do I have any concerns about Freddie being a first-time head coach handling the play calling duties?
None. Next question.
None. That was easy enough.
Doesn't concern you that he might be, and look, I'm not saying that he's not maybe the best guy to call the plays and that his genius isn't in calling plays as an innovative play caller. I just seem to think that young head coaches, first-time head coaches, tend to struggle with the jump from being responsible for the offense and 1/3 of the game to being responsible for all aspects of the game on offense, defense, special teams, managing the game, managing timeouts, figuring out if this is a spot where we go for it on 4th and 1, we punt, do we take the 3 here, do we go for it and try to punch in for 7 here? They tend to struggle with that. When do we challenge? When do we not? You see that, and part of me wonders that if you're still trying to call the plays, as I said before, are you putting in the correct time as the play caller that you need to be adjusting the plays based on the looks the defense is giving you and how they're adjusting? Are you still able to put that time in and then manage the game from a high level? Or are you trading one of those two off, and are you able to manage both of those things? Some guys like Sean Payton are able to do it. And it makes me wonder if, a lot of the younger head coaches who haven't been in that position for a long time, you see some of them struggle, and I understand why they do it. If I'm Freddie Kitchens, I'm thinking my play calling ability got me this job. Why would I give it up? Why would I not do what I do best? But I wonder if sometimes they're not ready for the full jump in responsibility they're about to take on.
See, I would argue that that's applicable to any individual. You just don't know. You don't know if any of these coaches are going to be able to step in and do the job that they're asked to do. It's very different than being a coordinator. But I will say this. We have so many examples, even recently, of guys being able to step in and doing their job on both levels. That's why I have a lack of concern. And one of the things I counted today, 14 different head coaches in the NFL call plays, whether it be offense or defense. And there's the stigma's not there anymore. You have guys like Matt Nagy, you have Doug Peterson. Those are just the most recent examples who stepped off of coaching staffs, barely called any plays as offensive coordinator, let alone serving as offensive coordinators full time, took over their organizations, still remain play callers, and they're as successful as you can possibly be. So it's really going to come down to, one, Kitchens' personality and how he takes that step up, two, whom he hires to surround himself with. And that's something that gets overlooked throughout this entire process. We concentrate so much on the head coaching hire that we don't pay enough attention to the staff he surrounds him with. And I want to use Peterson as an example one more time, because I remember the hiring cycle where Hugh Jackson was hired, Doug Peterson's hired. Guys, I'm sure you remember this. Hugh Jackson was applauded by almost everyone at the time. Yeah. Do you know which coach was generally accepted as the worst hire that cycle?
Peterson was.
Exactly. But when the next few days and weeks, I sat there and I saw him hire Jim Schwartz, and I saw him hire Frank Reich, and I saw him hire John DeFilippo, and I thought to myself, damn, he's putting together a hell of a staff. And we saw how they came together and really just fed off each other and did just such a wonderful job leading to the Super Bowl. So while I will applaud the Freddie Kitchens hire all day long, I'm still waiting to see what's next. And that may be as important, if not more so.
So I'm glad you went there, because that's where I wanted to go next. You and I have been doing something similar. You've been tweeting about it, and I've been researching, writing names down, and going to Twitter and going, come on, Sobo, leave one for me. So obviously everybody's doing some research on who these guys could be. I'm going to start backwards, though. So Since you're on with us right now, I'm not sure if you're on Twitter currently, but there's a report coming out that Bill Callahan and Jim Tomsula are both considering trying to leave the Redskins as well, just like their special teams coordinator just did and went to the Falcons. If either of those two guys came available, I believe Callahan's the O-line coach and Tomsula is the D-line coach. Correct. If either of those guys would come available right now, would you have interest, even though I don't believe they have a direct connection to Kitchens, would you have interest in either of them in joining Freddie's staff in Cleveland?
Callahan, yes. He's one of the best offensive line coaches in football, hands down. Tomsula, while I love Coach Tomsula, and years ago he was actually a dark horse candidate for the Cleveland job. A lot of people don't realize that when he was still working as assistant with San Francisco 49ers. I think there's just as good options already on staff or potentially replaceable with when you start mentioning Brenson Buckner, who was going to leave Tampa Bay staff, and obviously Clyde Simmons, who's already on staff and has yet to be determined whether he's leaving or not. So offensively, you need to upgrade offensive line coach. I mean, I know everyone loves Bob Wiley. I get it. I watched Hard Knocks too. He's a great guy to listen to, a good dude overall, and he's a solid coach. But he's not, in my opinion, one of the upper echelon guys. Callahan is. And if he wants to escape that cluster that is the Washington Redskins organization, please go after him full bore. Because I've been told from those around the league, the two most important hires you can possibly make as a coach, one is your offensive line coach, and two is your strength and conditioning coach. So the strength and conditioning coaches are already in place in Cleveland. Now it's time to go solidify that offensive front and continue to build upon what you've already done this year. And I'll give Wiley credit that offensive line went from porous to rock steady by the end of the season. Now, it wasn't entirely him. It was as much Kitchens and Mayfield and scheme and Greg Robinson kind of finally realizing his potential. Thank you, LaCharles Bentley. So all those mitigating factors came together and they formed a great unit. I think you can get even better. And if you can make that right hire with a Callahan or someone of his ilk, which is going to be hard to come across, that's what you need to do. And that's why when I looked at with Arizona hiring Bruce Arians, I immediately stated, and you guys can attest to this, that it's going to be a problem for Freddie Kitchens because they're going to be hiring from the same coaching pool. And one of those was Harold Goodwin, who could have been the offensive line coach in Cleveland. Instead, he's going to be in Tampa Bay.
I mean, it sounds like, it's stating the obvious here. Hello, Captain Obvious. You are very concerned with the coaching, the staff that Freddie Kitchens is going to be able to assemble here because of the Bruce Arians hire. Is it that you fear him? Is it a reluctance maybe to hire some of the more experienced guys who may overshadow him? Or is it that maybe as a first-time head coach, a younger head coach with this job, he's not going to be that the guys he's connected to aren't going to be there now because Arians is going to take them, and Arians will be able to have that clout to pull them away and the personal loyalty. I can hear the fear in your voice about the staff a little bit because of Arians. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, where you're fearing that Freddie's going to have his struggles now that he doesn't have that coaching pool?
Well, neither of those are my main concerns. The one that being, can he pull in those coaches he's not familiar with? We don't know that. Now, John Dorsey can obviously help within that search, but a lot of times, first of all, you don't want to take that power out of your head coach's hands of hiring his own staff. And second of all, most coaches prefer familiarity. It'll say a lot about Kitchens, whom he can bring in as his assistants, as his coordinators, and whether they are the same old, or guys he grew up in the system with, or if he can lure some of the top names. Again, let's use Hugh Jackson as an example. Remember people being excited about Todd Haley. Remember people being excited about Ray Horton. Okay. So sometimes you're not hiring necessarily the right guy, you're hiring the right names. And to flip that on its ear, let's look at what happened in Indianapolis this year. Okay. Josh Daniels takes a job, leaves last second, but they still hired defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. Now, Matt Eberflus was one of the top candidates in Cleveland. No one knew who he was 9 months ago, right? Now he's one of the most sought-after defensive coordinator / head coaching candidates in the NFL. So I'm not going to say I don't know if he can hire the right guys. I'm just worried that his reach around the league or whether he'll fall back on those he's familiar with.
I think that's what I was trying to say, but you said it much more articulately than I did.
That's why we had him come on.
Well, I could barely talk as it is. I'm sucking down throat lozenges like they're nothing at the moment, gentlemen. So you guys got me at an advantage.
So sticking with the O-line, Sobo, I had a name here from the research and wanted to get your take on it. Russ Grimm spent 07 to 12 in Arizona with Kitchens there at the same time. I believe he was most recently with was it with the Titans, I think? But what are your thoughts on Russ Grimm as a potential O-line coach? Or if not Grimm, who else do you have on your radar, after obviously Callahan? Well,
it's going to be difficult because we have to see who's coming available. And I'm not trying to cop out an answer here, but in certain situations, we don't know in incoming staffs if they're going to retain who they are and who they're not. And one example that we came across, we discussed in the forums, is Brent Boyer, obviously not an offensive line coach, but he's still under contract as one of the top special team coaches in the NFL. Amos Jones is now gone. So if Brent Boyer, is he going to be retained by Adam Gase? Yes, Adam Gase. We can joke about that later.
Yeah, I saw that.
But is someone like Boyer going to be retained? So I don't have the answer to that yet, and I want to see where some of these potential openings come. Grimm is obviously established, obviously someone that has time, has some experience with Kitchens, and would make a lot of sense. But I'm not sure he's the right guy for the job. I don't have that answer yet, and I'm sorry that in that case I don't, because when you look at some of the line guys, especially at Arizona, Goodwin was there was the entire time with Arians. So that was where his most comfort level is. And now he's already in Tampa Bay. Where does he go next? And that, to me, is the crux of this entire conversation, because I don't know if anyone outside of the walls of Berea know quite yet who he and the types of coaches he wants to bring in, or how influential John Dorsey's going to be in suggestions. Like, for example, we see that Darrell Bevel's once again making the rounds as a potential offensive coordinator candidate. He's one of the favorites to maybe land in Jacksonville. Okay, so he obviously has a history with the Green Bay crowd in Cleveland. Would you bring in an experienced coordinator like Bevel to work with Kitchens to take a little bit of the onus off of the play calling duties? You still have Kitchens calling plays, but you have an experienced guy next to him so that you don't have to worry about everything on game days and whatnot. So to me, that's the most pressing question, and I don't have the answers yet. And I'm excited to see how they move forward from this point now that they've settled on their guy. And the next step is filling out the entire roster.
All right, well, then let me frame it this way, because I'm going to pull a name out of you, and I'm going to force you to have a name out here. You don't have to stick it to him, but if you could choose one guy to be on Freddie Kitchens' staff that's either available now or could potentially become available. So if he doesn't come available, nobody's going to say, oh, Sobo, you messed up or anything like that. But if you could pick one guy to be on this staff from the available or potentially available pool, who would it be?
I was discussing a scenario on social media today that I think would be kind of interesting. So I'm not going to give you a singular person. I'll give you a group because they all have experience working with Freddie. And they all come from another certain franchise that may turn brown stomachs a little bit, but could work well together. If you do get rid of Clyde Simmons and bring in Brenson Buckner, who you worked with, Larry Foote as linebacker coach, and Deshae Townsend as secondary coach, these are guys that know each other well. They are very solid coaches. I think they can teach the fundamentals of the position, all having played and all having earned respect. And then once you put a defensive coordinator in place ahead of them, to me, that's a really solid defensive staff that you can't poke holes through, and you have the potential to raise the overall consistency within the Browns defensive side of the football. Because for everything that Greg Williams did, and they were aggressive and they created turnovers, and at times they played exceptional football, the lack of consistency and discipline we saw on a week-by-week basis is one of the main reasons in my mind that Williams wasn't a real serious candidate to become head coach. You want guys that can come in, teach the game, teach the concepts, be able to have them always in the right position to make plays. And that's something that was lacking. So when I mentioned those three names, I know all three of them have ties to Freddie, and I know all three of them can step in and do solid jobs from day one.
You know what? I feel good because Buckner and Foote were two of the names from my research that stood out to me as guys that could potentially come in here. So I got two right. Yay. Another name that stood out to me, Sobo, and mainly because Browns fans will remember his name, is Steve Hyden, former tight end of the Browns. After he finished his career, he went on to be a tight ends assistant and an offensive line assistant, I believe it was, with the Cardinals from 2013, and he's still there. I mean, I'm assuming he's on the way out with Cliff Kingsbury's staff coming in. He's somebody that kind of stands out to me, mainly because he's a former player, but also because he did work hand-in-hand with Freddie Kitchens there.
Well, and also he has experience working with special teams as well. So you get a little bit of a renaissance coach that could potentially come in. And that would make sense. It really would, because First of all, I expected Greg Seaman to go. Now I didn't expect almost the wholesale changes on the offense side of the ball, but you can tell. I mean, it's obvious that Freddie wanted the stink of the Hugh Jackson staff out of the building and decided to move on. And that's fine. That's his decision. That's his choice. And you need to move forward with that. So if you're looking at it, Hayden would be a logical choice. I think a very good choice, someone that has that background in multiple different areas and really shows me he could be that guy to potentially take someone like David Njoku and elevate who he is as a player to really, because I don't know, remember if you guys remember watching Steve Hayden much, gentlemen, but
I do.
He was very good at the little things at playing the position, running routes properly, blocking, consistency. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the most explosive tight end, but he always got the job done. Now, if you can get that mentality in someone as talented as David Njoku, now you have an all-pro tight end. So that one makes a lot of sense to me. Now I'll flip the script on you slightly and look at another former Brown I think could potentially be a guy of interest, and that would be Mike Caldwell, as assistant head coach and linebackers
right?
coach.
Yeah,
so for the New York Jets. So while we don't have a lot of options, at least in-house or with familiarity with Kitchens, now that's someone that I could potentially see as a defensive coordinator candidate.
Have you heard anything on Al Saunders? I know his son was let go as part of the wave, but his name wasn't originally mentioned. Some people out there are like, well, if they let his son go, he's probably gone, but I wasn't sure, and I hadn't heard anything about him yet either.
I don't think they officially released it, but I don't expect him to be back either.
Okay. All right. Well, my final question for you, Sobo. How many Super Bowls are we going to win with Freddie Kitchens now? But no, seriously, like
all of them.
All of them. No, I mean, Sobo, obviously, this was all fantastic. Everybody out there is definitely going to be like, guys, why don't you just give the podcast to Sobo moving forward, and you guys come on every once in a while as guests? No. But no, we really appreciate your time. I know you've been battling the sickness over there, so we appreciate everything. Thank you so much for your time, and until next time.
No, thank you, gentlemen. Anytime you need me, you know how to get a hold of me. And today is a good day. If you're a Cleveland Browns fan, they did the right thing. And it's been a long time since that can be said. So I'm excited for this franchise's future. I stated it already. I'm going to state it again. Freddie Kitchens has the potential to be the perfect guy at the perfect time. And I don't know if I could have been more excited from the fan perspective of me for another candidate. There was concerns with Arians. There was concerns with McCarthy. Stefanski made some sense, but he didn't have those ties like we did with Kitchens. So to me, this is the right path moving forward, and it should lead Cleveland, if not to the promised land, at least to the postseason, and that's the least they can ask for at this time.
Couldn't have said it any better myself, Sobo. Great stuff as always, and we will get you on next time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a good one.
You too. Scott, I mean, I didn't expect Sobo to give us all that with him having the sickness he's battling with the throat issues, but I feel like we just got 30 minutes of pure unadulterated Sobo for everybody out there. I mean, for those of you who are OBR subscribers, you obviously get to interact with him all the time in the forums. For those of you who are just fans and followers on Twitter, you see him, you know him, he's big time, he's Bleacher Report. I didn't expect that. That was a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of amazing information. There's stuff behind the scenes a little bit. Like, it's not like insider information, but it's a good window into the thought process of what was going on there, and a high level interpretation of this hiring and what it means.
I almost felt bad at times, like stop it, like kind of like asking another question. I just kind of wanted him to just keep going and going and going. Like, I love his insight. Like, I threw Bill Callahan and Jim Tomsula out of nowhere. And I don't know if he's on Twitter while we're talking right now. I mean, this report just came out like 20 minutes before we even started the show, so I don't know if he saw it. But he definitely dropped a lot of great information there about Kitchens. He wouldn't even just no concern at all about Freddie calling
plays. Didn't even entertain it.
Nope. So
I will say
you're the only one with concern.
I'm not as against it as I used to be, and that's not just because Sobo made me sound like an idiot for even being concerned about it. But I used to be very, very concerned about it. Sobo's probably right that it comes down to the individual. And look, he said 14 coaches do it. that means that 32 teams in the NFL, right? Or is it 30?
32.
Okay, it's 32. It's the NBA is the one that has 30. It's 32 teams in the NFL. So that means 18. If I did my math right, 18 don't. So it's not to the point that everybody can do that. There's a lot of coaches who realize that they can't do it. We'll see if Freddie Kitchens is one who can. I hope he is. I want to believe that he is. And if he's got the right talent behind him and he's got the right staff around him, it's not going to be an issue. So, or it might not be an issue. We'll find out.
We will definitely find out. So the first thing I want to start with, obviously, we don't really need to rehash on Freddie anymore. I mean, we've all talked about it. Sobo's talked about it. It's a great hire. It's a great day for Cleveland. We'll see what happens in the results, because
it really is. You've got a franchise quarterback. You've got your up and coming offensive mind. You've got a running back who at one point was over 1,000 yards and finished under. You've got talent at wide receiver. I mean, you've got a game-wrecking defensive end. You've got a potential future shutdown corner. It's a good day in Cleveland. For once, you're not going insane when you're trying to find the positives about the Browns and just deluding yourself that what's there. We're not sitting here and talking about what Barkevius Mingo is going to develop into.
Easy.
We're not talking
why
about.
Is it always Barkevius, man? I liked Barkevius. I thought he was a good.
We're not talking about what Cameron Wimbley is going to do. We're not talking about. Look, this is Team Armonte Bryant. We're not talking about what Armonte Bryant's going to develop into. We're not talking about what guys could be. We're talking about what guys are today. We're not talking about what Lee Suggs may one day be. We're talking about what guys are right now. And right now we have playmakers. It's a good day.
So speaking of the right now, Sobo slightly spoiled my second half of after our interview podcast, but that's all right because he brought it up. The change in organizational structure, big news. It's the second biggest news of the day, in my opinion, aside from, obviously hiring Freddie Kitchens. The report is Kitchens is going to report directly to John Dorsey. This is a massive, as Sobo said, a massive change for Jimmy Haslam. Because Jimmy Haslam is used to, as Sobo put it, that boardroom mentality where everybody's around the table, everybody has a direct line to him, everybody can speak directly to him. Now, Kitchens is going to report directly to Dorsey. Dorsey is going to continue to report to Haslam. So, with you being a very big anti-Haslam guy, this has to make you so happy. But on the other side of things, I personally think it's going to promote more collaboration between Kitchens and Dorsey. What do you think?
It has to, because that's his boss. He doesn't have a second boss to make an end run around. So the two of them have to work together. Dorsey isn't worrying if Freddie's running behind his back to Jimmy. This isn't going to be like a Hugh Jackson, Sashi Brown, Jimmy Haslam type of deal where Sashi doesn't know if he can trust the head coach because the head coach is whispering in Hugh's ear and sharpening up a knife when he's not looking to stab in his back. Okay. Sashi, I think, had to test his food to make sure Hugh didn't poison it in the lunchroom. This isn't going to be that type of dynamic. And one of the questions I almost asked Sobo, and I really didn't want to be this guy because I just said it's a good day for Cleveland, so I didn't ask. Being the conspiracy guy, how much of hiring Freddie Kitchens over a guy with the resume like Mike McCarthy was that he lost the power struggle with a big-name head coach like Andy Reid and the owner and the history here in Cleveland? How much of it might have been sitting there saying, I'm going to get the head coach that I want and I feel is qualified, but one that doesn't have the star power and the resume to go throw himself between me and the owner and win a power struggle.
Huh. I have not even entertained that thought at all throughout this process. That is intriguing, and I cannot wait until somebody asks it and asks the insiders, because I'm not going to have an answer, and then I'm going to edit it and put Sobo's name in front of it, so he has to answer it.
You're kind of wanting to dial Sobo back up and be like, damn it, Scott, why would you not ask that question?
I do want to call him, but, my man's got a really bad throat.
That was the question. So I was going to ask that question, and then by the time it rolled by, you asked the question.
I pointed at you 3 times. I was like, hey,
that was at the end. It was at the beginning. I was going to ask it, and by the time I was ready to ask, we'd had to go so far back I didn't. But
that's a really good question, Scott. You have to maybe. My hope would be no. My hope would be that Freddie Kitchens proved himself, wowed them so much in the interview that nothing else mattered and he was their guy. But, you never know.
He just lost a power struggle with Andy Reid. why would you want to put yourself in a situation with a guy like Jimmy Haslam who's shown that he will listen to the coach? So, look,
and
back on the real question.
And maybe we don't get that organizational structure changed, too.
Correct. Because then maybe a guy like McCarthy comes in and has the clout to say, no, I'm reporting directly to you if I take this job. I'm not reporting to this guy.
Well, it's part of the rumors we heard today, not to go off track too much, but that McCarthy wasn't willing to keep Kitchens as his OC, and that's one of the reasons why the Browns didn't even have him in for the interview.
But the power structure change is a good thing. So Jimmy Haslam needs to just sit down and shut up and realize he doesn't understand football, go to the booth, watch the team win, and collect his money. Jimmy, you don't know football. Your wife doesn't know football. You apparently know how to run Pilot Flying J truck stops and how to run a good rebate scam to steal money from trucking companies. Allegedly. That's what you apparently know how to do. You built a really successful truck stop company. It's the same kind of concept with what I said about Freddie Kitchens calling the plays. Well, Jimmy's used to running his business and being hands-on with his business, and he thinks that extends to any business that he runs. And he's going to run the style of business that he knows. Sobo's dead right. If you're in a big company, a national company, or a corporation, then that's exactly how you operate. You've got the CEO and the chairman at the top, and every single department reports up to their department head, and then they get together in a boardroom, and you've got the 10 department heads or the 15 department heads sitting in that boardroom, and every single one of them dotted line reports up to Jimmy Haslam. So if you go look at JP Morgan Chase, where I used to work, every single employee in that company's hierarchy ends at Jamie Dimon. And then there's like 15 people or 10 people who report directly to Jamie Dimon. And so all of those people have the right to go to the CEO chairman and tell them what they think. And so in Jimmy's mind, the head coach is the guy who's in charge of all the football coaches on the field. And the general manager is the guy who's in charge of all the business side stuff and the talent acquisition stuff and the scouts and all that BS. And they can come straight to him. And then there's, the business manager guys on the side who run the numbers and the accounting, and the marketing guy can report directly to him. And Jimmy's the CEO. So for Jimmy, it makes absolute perfect sense that the head coach has a direct dotted line to him and the general manager has a direct dotted line to him. To Jimmy, they're two separate departments. And the head coach is the head of the football guys on the field, and the general manager is the head of the front office guys who don't go on the field on Sunday.
Except for John Dorsey goes on the football field on Sunday.
You get what I mean.
Rocking his khakis and his Air Force Dad ones and the brown sweater.
The guys who are down there on game day. Yeah. I'm killing the joke. I'm just stepping all over the joke, being literal Scott with it. Yeah, that's fantastic radio, Scott. Anyway, to Jimmy, it makes perfect sense. And Jimmy doesn't understand football. And in football, it's supposed to be all the coaches report up to the head coach reports up to the general manager. All the front office people report up to their bosses who report to the general manager. And the general manager is the CEO chairman who reports up to the owner. The owner, Jimmy, wants to be involved. Like this is his business. And he doesn't want to be involved daily, but he wants to be able to talk to his leadership team on an individual level and say, well, who's the leader of my coaches? Well, that's Hugh, or was Hugh. That's Freddie. So now, Freddie, you report to me. I mean, this is a good change, though, because this is something that works in business, but it doesn't work as well on an NFL team unless you've got Bill Parcells made it work. Bill Belichick makes it work. I don't think Bill Belichick reports directly to Robert Kraft. Maybe Robert Kraft reports to Bill Belichick. I mean, that's very possible.
Probably.
They all might report to Tom Brady. I'm not sure. But it's hard to make that work in the NFL. It becomes contentious. You've got a football guy who wants his thing. You've got a general manager. And unless they're married to the same vision, you're going to have a power struggle. So Jimmy, the king of dysfunction, getting out of the way and letting everything run through his general manager and his football guy who knows how to run a football team and knows the business is a good thing.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and between you and Sobo, I mean, you got it on lock, and I got my 2 cents in with Sobo. So I'd like to switch over really quickly And then, we will wrap up this podcast as probably one of our shortest in history because, we got plenty to talk about all offseason and we got plenty of podcasts to record. So let's just go over to the assistant coaches real quick and the potential hires. First thing I want to start with. So we had a good day, right? We had Freddie Kitchens as the head coach. The second greatest thing was that Freddie's going to report directly to Dorsey. And the number 3 most amazing thing that happened today, famous Amos Jones is going to be out as the special teams coordinator. I know this will make you happy. I know this will make Jason happy. I know this will make everybody happy because on every game day, I would have about 10 text messages from different people. Damn special teams coordinator needs to be fired. Get rid of him. Amos needs to go every single week. So that'll make a lot of people happy. I'm
going to say I partially feel bad for Amos. Because, it's the same thing I said for years with Tabor as a special teams coach here. You're dealing with a reconstructed roster. Mm-hmm. What do you expect?
And that's what I talked about a lot early on the podcast in the season. I'm like, guys, let's not bury him yet.
The special teams unit got significantly better as the season went along. It was still one of the worst special teams units in the league. Hey. But look, I'm back to my broken record. The Browns at times still had depth problems this year. And when the injuries piled up is when it looked really bad. When the Browns are mostly healthy, they look really good. But the Browns do have, if you crack that crust of the starters and the top 25 players on this team, you start to get into problems around player 30. That's going to tell you where your problems on your special teams are. If you've got problems fielding second stringers on your defensive line to the point that you're playing your 4 starting defensive linemen until they're sucking oxygen and are the walking dead in the third quarter. I mean, if you've got a game where you started your wide receiving core in total had 11 catches outside of Jarvis Landry, what do you think you have in special teams? I mean, look, Amos can't kick the ball. He cannot kick the ball. He did not miss those field goals in week 1. He's got to work with what you give him. So do I feel slightly bad for him? I'll say I feel worse for Amos than I do for Bob Wiley. Bob Wiley had a lot more talent to work with, and he didn't get much out of it.
So, special teams side of the ball, I'm not going to go position by position and name potential candidates, but special teams is going to be talked about a lot. Sobo, I believe he mentioned Brant Boyer for a second, still under contract with the Jets, but he could come available if Adam Gase decides to kind of bring his own people there in with the Jets. If he becomes available, I have a feeling he's going to be a hot commodity on the open market. Josh Cribbs was part of the coaches and coaching staff let go. Don't know if he resurfaces back here. He was an intern / special teams assistant, so nothing much there. I know a lot of people in ATI over on OBR have been asking about him. I don't see him ready to take that next leap. A name that I would keep an eye on. I was doing research today about people that have come across and worked with Freddie. Kevin Spencer was the Cardinals special teams coach from 2007 to 2012. During that time period, they had one of the better special teams units. I believe that was earlier on in Patrick Peterson's career when he was going nuts on special teams. Now, I can't tell you what his exact stats were for all those years. Somebody probably is going to say he was terrible in 08 and 10, and how dare you not know that? But, we're just looking for connections, as Sobo said at this point. And we don't know who's going to come available and who's not. I mean, the Redskins special teams coach was granted his release, I think it was today or yesterday, and he joined the Falcons as their special teams coach. That was out of nowhere. Like I mentioned earlier with Sobo, we'll have Bill Callahan and Jim Tomsula talking about potentially getting out of Washington. So you're going to have guys coming up. So that's why I don't want to go through everything, but I had a couple of names really stick out to me, and one of them's already been confirmed to be interviewing for a job with the Browns. So we'll start there. Stump Mitchell, running backs coach of the Jets. He was with the Cardinals from 13 to 16. They're obviously Gase coming in, so they're granting him the ability to interview. I was so excited about this guy. I'm like, oh, this guy, he's definitely going to get hired by the Browns. I'm going to shock everybody on the podcast. Nope. Okay, I got by the man. Couple of other names. I mentioned Hayden earlier with Sobo. Rick Christoffel as well. He's the tight ends coach in Arizona. He's been the tight ends coach there since 2013. I don't know what his future is with the change there. Sobo already stole Larry Foote and Brenston Buckner from me. Another guy that kind of stood out in all of this, and as weird as it sounds, and I don't think that it's a legit kind of connection, but Bill Davis, the Buckeyes linebackers coach, who just was kind of not fired, but not being retained by Ryan Day. They spent time together as in Dallas, I believe it was, no, in Arizona, 07-08 as the linebackers coach and 9-10 as the defensive coordinator there. I don't know what Bill Davis's future may hold, but he's somebody. I mean, Sobo covered Mike Caldwell, so he's somebody that could maybe be in the mix too. I don't know if he's a DC. He's definitely not a DC guy, but if you're looking at a NFL level linebackers coach, I mean, maybe he could be a better NFL coach than he was.
I guess I got to give him the same leeway that I gave the special teams coaches here.
Ohio
the fact
State's
that
linebackers were terrible.
Ohio State's linebackers were garbage. That's the crew that you should see on a Northwestern team, and not on Ohio State. I'm sorry, different thing, but that's the worst linebacking core I've seen at Ohio State in 17 years.
No, but it's a good reminder, because people are going to go, Ohio State fans specifically that are Browns fans are going to be like, no, I saw the linebackers this year. They were terrible. Okay, do you remember the linebackers for the past, I don't know, however many years? Like, they've been one of the best groups in the country. So, no, it's a great point to bring up. And then two names that don't have direct ties to Freddie Kitchens that I'm aware of, that might be in the mix on the defensive side of the ball. So one of our subscribers brought it up. I really wish I had wrote their name down. Jack Del Rio. And then I've seen the name floating around out there on the Twitterverse since then. I believe Lane commented on it when somebody asked him about it. Jack Del Rio was somebody I didn't even have in my, mindset. But, I mean, he could come in, and you know how you were talking about, you and Sobo both talking about adding impactful people to the staff. The Jack Del Rio hire is almost like the Jim Schwartz hire for Doug Peterson, right? You add a former head coach, defensive mind that many people respect. He could come in and be your DC and be that strong guy on that side of the ball. And then another one on the defensive side of the ball, too, would be Dom Capers, who was the DC in Green Bay before heavy Mike Pettin came on board. So, I mean, you're talking about another guy who has a lot of experience in this league. And so I just wanted to throw some names out there for everybody out there, because I know we're getting a lot of questions over on the OBR, and I know the guys will chime
that's
in,
an intriguing hire. And
which one?
Jack Del Rio.
I know when it was asked, I was like, I didn't even think about it.
It's a name, but it's a guy who has been in this league, has been successful as a defensive coordinator. He was successful to levels as a head coach. He wasn't a complete failure at Jacksonville for those 8 years he was there. They just got tired of listening to his voice. His tenure in Oakland, well, I mean, it could have been better. But you've got a guy who definitely is qualified for the job, definitely has shown success at the job, and he hasn't been coaching for the last year. So he needs a job. And this defense, look, this is an intriguing defense to coach. You've got Myles Garrett. You've got Ogunjobi who can get after the quarterback. You've got Emmanuel Ogbah, who, if he doesn't impress you with his pressure, is an end that you know that you can trust to play contain and be smart. You've got Denzel Ward playing cornerback. You've got a good, young, aggressive defense that went out there and made plays and was exciting to watch. And it's a defense that he could mold to his style. And the Browns still have resources that they can go throw to get him the players that he wants on that side of the ball. This isn't one of those things where you get Jack Del Rio because no one else is calling. If you're looking at the open jobs and where you can go coach as a defensive coordinator and be successful, for once, the Browns defense doesn't look so bad. It's a team on the upswing. And we talked about getting experienced coaches and leadership around Freddie so that if he's going to call his own plays, he knows that he doesn't have to be as involved on the defensive side of the ball. So if Freddie's going to spend extra time on the offensive side of the ball, on the game planning, on the game day, then it's good to have a guy like Jack Del Rio, who you know has run the whole show, and you can say, I'm going to trust you to handle this aspect. And I know you can handle it, which frees me up to be more efficient in game management and managing the offensive side of the ball and putting myself into the game where I need to be on the sideline. I like that idea. And, see how that shakes out. But that's very intriguing, and it's one of those coaches that I feel better about Freddie calling his own plays if you got someone with that type of experience running the other side. I'm not saying it has to be him, but I like the concept.
Well, on that note, I'm not going to bring up any more names or ask any more questions because we told all of these listeners that we'd be out of here, and then we told them we'd find a way to like talk for another 30 minutes, and I feel like we're getting there. So on that note, that's it. We are done for tonight. Big thank you to Brent Sobleski for jumping on and educating us on everything Freddie Kitchens and potential, coordinators and assistants hirings and talking power struggle and just coming on and, I mean, sounding great despite having like his throat all messed up and being sick. So appreciate you for coming on, Sobo. Appreciate everybody out there for listening. One quick note before we go. We've been toying around with this because we took a couple weeks off due to the holidays and trying to come up with an off-season content plan for you all. Our goal, and when we say goal, is we're going to stick to this, but we might produce more. So our goal here is going to be to produce one of these every other week during the off season until we kind of get closer to free agency and the draft. That basically gives us through the month of January and the month of February to do a show every other week. Now, if we get the OBR guys reaching out, the rest of the team, and they're like, hey, we really want to come on, we want to talk about this, Scott and I have no problem doing a weekly show. I mean, he lives 15 minutes around the corner from me. This isn't a problem for either of us. But so our goal is going to be every other week for the remainder of the January and February. And then once we get closer to March and April for the free agency and for the draft, we'll definitely be firing things up. While that's going on, we're going to kind of be in the lab cooking up good ideas for the shows over the next month and a half, lining up some good guests for free agency and the draft. Because obviously we have this awesome team at the OBR, but we also want to give some national perspective as well. So we're going to reach out to some national people, former players, and try to line up some really good guests for the rest of, leading us all the way until training camp.
Bob, I'm going to throw one out right now, and the listeners can tell us what they think. OBR Straight Talk with the staff, live remote draft show somewhere.
So you're going to yell at me? If I'm more than happy for you guys to do it. As of right now, I'm going to be in Vegas for the bowling nationals. I have the national bowling tournament, so I not to dump water or be the wet blanket there, but I mean we can put it together. You'll get Jared to come up for sure. Sobo's on. If Sobo doesn't have Bleacher Report responsibilities, you can put Jake. Jake might even come up from Columbus. I mean, obviously Lane. I don't need to say Lane. Fred, if he's not working with the WTM guys. I mean, there'll be lots of opportunity. You could definitely put something together great. So yeah, we can definitely toy that around with the guys and see who might be available.
All right.
Well, on that note, everybody, you have a fantastic evening. Thanks so much for listening. Evening, day, morning, whenever you listen to this. We appreciate you as always. And if you're listening to this before Thursday night, take advantage of OBR's big special going on. You get 4 months for the price of one, just $9.95. That takes you all the way until after the NFL draft. So you're getting all the film breakdowns, all the rumors, all the conversation with Sobo, all of Lane's great insight, and more. Check it out. Have a good night, everybody. And as always, go Browns.